Looking for the perfect way to say I love you, thank you, or to just brighten someone's day? With Mr. Roses, you can say all that and more with their stunning range of luxurious, long-lasting roses, handpicked for their beauty and elegance. And the best part? With same-day delivery available, you can send that special someone the perfect gift, even at the last minute. Visit mrroses.com.au now to find that perfect gift for that perfect someone. Mr. Roses, proud sponsors of the Uzo Talk podcast.
Crazy Productions presents Thanasis Vasilakos and Master Tempo direct from Greece, live in Sydney for a massive 4-hour show on Friday, 16th of May at Canterbury Hurlstone Park RSL Club. Tickets are selling fast. Call 0418 451 481 to book today. There's no Ouzo talk without a bottle of Ouzo, which is why we love the Greek Providor. Get a real taste of the very best produce that Greece has to offer. From olive oils and delicious artisan sweets to unique spirits, earthy herbs and memorable wines. Visit thegreekprovidor.com.au to see their amazing range. The Greek Providor, proud sponsors of the Ouzo Talk podcast.
Sound is.
Nick Athanasiou, another episode of Ouzo Talk, and this is a special one because we have another very important person, not just from the world of Australian politics, but international diplomacy. Very exciting, isn't it?
It is, mate. There's something about me and you and diplomats. I've said it previous years. We seem to attract them.
Yeah, we're operating in rarefied air. We've had people from ambassadors from Greece to Australia, Australia to Greece, Cyprus, and now I feel as though we're sort of stepping it up a little bit because we've got someone in the room who has recently been the ambassador to the US. So obviously dealing with some very important issues and a very important relationship. It's really exciting for you and I to have him in the room, isn't it?
It is, definitely. Look, and the timing's good, actually. There's a Maria Vamvakino from Melbourne. She's the first Greek-born woman in Australia's federal parliament, retires from federal politics after 23 years.
Yes, that's been in the last 24 hours at the time of recording, so very interesting. And, there are so many Greek Australians in politics, taking part in the political process and whatnot, so that's part of what we're here to celebrate, because the gentleman that we've got in the room is, as I said, a Greek Australian, former politician and diplomat who recently concluded his term of service as the 22nd Australian ambassador to the United States. A member of the Liberal Party during his time in office, he has at times been described as being one of the most powerful people in Australia, owing to his proximity to the Prime Minister, serving as Chief of Staff to the Howard government between 1997 to 2007. He has been Australia's Minister for Industry, Innovation and Science, and was also a Senator for New South Wales in the Australian Parliament from 2011 to 2019. Aside from his political and diplomatic career, he also boasts an accomplished corporate career, having been a director with Goldman Sachs as well as managing director of the National Australia Bank in 2009. He also boasts an Order of Australia for good measure. Joining us in the distillery today is the Honourable Arthur Sinodinos. Welcome to Ouzo Talk.
Thank you, guys. Great to be with you. It's good to see there's lots of ouzo on the table. Maybe we finish it before we conclude the talk.
Well, I tell you, most people in your sort of position would never really touch the stuff, owing to their position.
It looks like water to me, so it can't be too alcoholic.
Sparkling water, that's it.
It's the Greek version of sparkling water.
That's it.
Absolutely.
You mentioned off air basically that you do spend your time or split your time between Australia and the US.
Yes.
We've finally caught you here.
Absolutely.
What's it like, sort of coming back and forth in the current position that you're in?
Well, being in Washington because of so much that's happening there is a good place to be. And then being able to come back here, see family and friends and be able to talk about all this and talk to Australian companies about what's happening.
So originally, you're from Newcastle? You're born and bred in Newcastle?
Yeah, I was born in Newcastle East, near the water. My parents were from Kefalonia, both of them from Lixouri.
Beautiful. What part of Kefalonia?
Lixouri, which is like the number 2 city, down from Argostoli.
So you're one of my people. You're from that side.
The Ionian Islands, that's right.
Absolutely.
And they came to Australia in the 40s and 50s, and so they settled in Newcastle, and I was born up there and grew up in Newcastle, went to school in Newcastle.
All right, fantastic. We'll hold that thought because we're going to get into the episode properly and we'll go into a little more detail about your background in Greek history.
Definitely.
Nick, shall we do the honours?
Yes, mate. It's time. Let's have a drink.
All right. Stiniamas.
Cheers, boys.
Cheers.
Cheers, Arthur.
See ya.
Welcome.
Yep.
Welcome
Wonderful
back.
to have you here. Okay, now, I'm really interested in this one because, true to
was really
form,
good.
the Greek providore has come through with the goods. They've supplied a whole bunch of new bottles for us for this season, Nick. It's only the first batch. It
is.
But we have Dimino, which is from Mytilene.
Yes,
Oh, wow.
spelled Dimino. Mate, how good was it? That tasted really good.
It is fantastic. And I tell you what, I put that in the same sort of category as like a Plomari or a Barbayani or something like that.
Well, it's funny about that because it's from Mytilene.
Yeah.
That's where they all come from.
Exactly. It's not hard to see why. There's something in the water there. I don't know. Are you a big fan of this type of beverage,
ouzo?
Arthur?
Irregular,
Right.
because it's so strong.
Everyone's got a horror story.
Yeah. Mytilene, yeah, my father-in-law's from Mytilene.
Oh, is he?
He's the lesbian in the family.
Right. Does he make ouzo, though?
No, he doesn't, but he drinks it.
Yeah,
Of course.
Well, that's the other half. You either make it or you drink it.
Exactly.
No, beautiful.
At the end of the day, again, it's from the Greek Providore. They never miss, honestly. Crystal, greekprovidore.com.au. Make sure you're getting online. Check out the pantry stuff. Check out in the bar. This is where you get all this stuff. Thank you so much for being on board.
No, well done, well said. Also, big shout out goes to Mr. Roses. So they're on board again. So fantastic bunch of people that help more than just Greeks, but the whole Sydney Australian community with their roses. And, you know, they got more than just roses there, Tom. I think we might have mentioned it before.
We have mentioned it. There's a lot on there. So if you've got a last minute thing, υποχρέωση to get out of the way.
For those of you bullheads that missed out on Valentine's Day, I know we're in whatever month we're in now. This is an opportunity to catch up and make time. But they got beautiful sun white and sunflowers as well, Tom. I didn't even know they existed.
It's an online florist. That's the thing.
Beautiful
whatever,
bouquets.
whatever you want, get on there. The chocolates, the teddy bears. There's all sorts of great things on there. So yeah,
I'm just
Mr.
having a
Roses.
look now. Fragrant pink lilies. They look fantastic, Tom.
You want some, do you?
Yellow
I've
magnificent
had the
rose.
sunflowers. Fabulous. And
What?
We've got a new guest in the room. We want to
We
have to
do.
introduce her.
Someone's just walked in. We have Fiona Douskou, who is actually running for the seat of Barton at the moment, and who we understand Arthur is your mentor, isn't he?
He certainly is.
Very proud to have another Greek Australian running for office. Very exciting to have Arthur, obviously, as your mentor as well. Must be very proud.
Yes, I am. I'm very privileged. And it's such an honour to have Arthur as my mentor for over, 5 years now.
Amazing.
Fantastic. So I understand you're the only Greek Australian representing federal politics for Liberal. Is that correct?
I believe so at this next election, at least for New
Fantastic.
South Wales.
Yeah, well done. At least there you go, Tom. So everyone out there listening, put your votes in early.
Our people support our people. So, we're very proud to have you in the room. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later. Obviously, we were just about to get into Arthur's background. Okay, so Arthur, obviously, we mentioned briefly just before that, you're from Newcastle and you mentioned that you're from Kefalonia.
Yeah.
When did your parents actually come here? You said in the 40s or 50s. Where did they settle? What was it
Well,
like for them?
my father was a merchant mariner. He was on ships
Right.
in the Pacific during the war. And in 1945, he emigrated to Australia. Now, I thought he had jumped ship, but some years ago, they found his papers and he actually emigrated and ended up in East Sydney. Initially, he wanted to have a kaiki, be a sort of fisherman, but that didn't work out. So he became a seaman again, a merchant mariner on the big Australian ships, the BHP and other ships that went around the coast with the iron ore and coking coal and the rest. And he was based in Newcastle, which was then not just a big coal port, but a big steel city as well with BHP Steelworks. My mother came out in the early 50s after the earthquakes on Kefalonia. The families had known each other in Lixuri, so that made it a bit easier. And they settled in Newcastle, and their story is typical of many, not just Greek, but many migrant families that came to Australia to settle. In my father's case, he never went back to Greece.
Wow.
My mother did go back at various times. When she went back, she was surprised to find there was McDonald's in Greece because
go.
she had a view of what Greece was like when she left.
Of course, sure.
But we grew up there. The Greek Orthodox Church was the centre of social and community activity for the Greek community. So I was very much, and my family were very much part of it. So while my parents were not well off, they were okay. They were doing okay. It was a different era in Australia then.
Yeah.
Lots of jobs, wages were going up. It was an era where, you could play outside. People didn't lock doors. I mean, I'm not saying everything was perfect and it was a golden age, but it was a very different experience, and certainly the one that I have with my kids, where we are very much helicopter parents.
Sure.
Look, you mentioned earlier about your dad. So he was in World War II in the Pacific as a seaman. Was he representing Greece or was it Australia back then?
No, he was on commercial ships.
Oh, commercial ships.
And at that stage, he was a Greek citizen, but he'd gotten onto the ships from an early age. He was functionally illiterate. He didn't really go to school, and he did that to support his family. He'd lost an older brother, and of course in those days Greek families could be quite large, and some of them survived to adulthood. In his case, he had 2 sisters left in Greece who he supported, including after he got married. So again, his story is typical of what happened, and it's also the story of a lot of people from Kefalonia who made the sea their vocation or their calling. Yeah. And you have Kefalonites, as you have Greeks in America, Latin America, Australia, throughout the world.
Yeah, definitely. Similar story to that. My dad was a merchant seaman as well. I've got cousins from Kefalonia, so there's a bit of a connection there. So,
where are you from?
We're from Ipiro, up north.
Oh, right.
Yeah, Suliotes, in the mountains. So my dad was an orphan, and he, I think as a 12-year-old, ended up going to Womanitsa, was a waiter, and then went to Athens as a 15-year-old. And from there he did supposedly I heard he did a really good job serving a couple of captains on merchant ships. And
they took him on?
Yeah, they said, we'll give you better paying jobs. He ended up being a chef for 2 years, sailing around the world. And
what an adventure.
It is, yeah. And then that's where I got my adventure to backpack, which we've talked about many times on the show.
Yes.
Because of my dad.
And we're actually not far from you. We're in Gedgera. So
blimey.
It's just a few islands across.
You've got the cricket club, Corfu Cricket Club.
Well, there's 12 cricket clubs in on the island in total, believe it or not.
Absolutely. Very British island like that.
Very much so.
It's nearly a car park now, isn't it?
Well, funnily enough, it's the only UNESCO World Heritage cricket pitch in the world. And it's been
UNESCO?
Yes,
really?
and it is in that main square there.
Actually, we're going to check your DNA, whether you're actually British rather than Greek. It's suspicious there.
Yeah, well, you reckon you might have Asia Minor roots, don't you?
One person in the family's done a test, and it came back primarily from Greece and from, in particular, San Marino for some reason.
Really?
In particular, because obviously we've got the Venetian influence from that area, but I digress. Who knows?
San Marino, yeah, that's where they sent the really recalcitrant Greeks. Yeah. You're probably...
It makes sense.
It makes sense. Having met you, it makes sense.
I know, right?
So when your parents, did they meet here? No, they met in Kefalonia, you said.
They didn't know each other in Kefalonia. The families knew each other. So it was a bit, I think, like an arranged marriage, but the families knew each other. So they decided, this is good stock. It's all right.
Yeah.
We can go with this.
Classic.
Was a replica involved?
Of course there would have been.
No, I don't think there was in this case. I don't think my father asked for one.
No,
really?
He was mesmerised by your mum's beauty.
Well, perhaps.
Wow. No exchange of goats or anything like that?
No.
A few cortines, a few, paplomata.
Bottles of ouzo if I need them. I've got a daughter. If I need them, I might take some.
You know where to come.
We've got heaps. You haven't seen in there either. Yes. It's full.
The cover.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And they met in Sydney, or was it Newcastle they met?
Originally in Sydney and then went to Newcastle.
Okay. Was there a lot of Greeks in Newcastle? We're talking about, 1950s now, 1960s?
About 5,000 or 6,000. A lot had jobs in the factories, particularly the BHP Steelworks. Some were in maritime, like my father. And then others went into the shops, as they did in other parts of Australia.
Yeah. Well, there is a thriving Greek community in Newcastle now, and a little bit of a trivia for you. We have a cousin who is the main priest in Newcastle.
Not Skorovilis.
Yes.
You're related to him.
We are.
Jeepers creepers.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
First cousins with my grandfather.
No.
I knew him when he first came to Newcastle.
There you go.
In 78.
Yes.
Wow.
I think it was.
He is my grandfather's first cousin.
He's been there that long as the priest.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Incredible.
He's part of the tapestry there.
The furniture.
Before we get into your career, so Fiona, give us your background. Where do your parents come from?
So both my parents come from the island of Limnos. So
Historic.
Beautiful island.
Very historic, especially links to Australia. And as we know, the Battle of Gallipoli, the Australian Anzacs were stationed there, and they have a hospital. I have to actually thank Arthur for assisting with Lizzie Kay and others to build a memorial walk in Limnos. I think, Arthur, you helped with securing over $4 million from the Australian Federal Government to secure that memorial. We all, yes.
We've heard a little bit about this because
Alison Duncan talked about it.
Yeah.
So the current Australian ambassador to Greece spoke at length about it on the episode that we had her on, and it's popped up a few times, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
Great initiative.
Well Fantastic. Done. So we didn't realise Arthur was behind it all.
I helped. I mean, there was a bit of a community support as well, the Limnian Association.
Yes.
Yeah, well done.
John Azarius
was
very helpful as well.
Exactly. So it's great to have a little piece of Australia in Limnos. My parents met at probably... I'm not exactly sure, but it was probably the Limnos Club.
Of course.
Of course.
And I certainly grew up in the Limnos Club. Every weekend I was dragged there, but I have fun memories.
So I've got to ask, Crazy Con connection at all? Because he's from there as
you
well.
must be, for sure.
I'm not really sure. But I know Tassos Bouzouki.
You're related to him?
I'm not sure if I'm related to him, but we do come from the same island.
There you go.
Yeah,
okay.
And just a plug for the Limnos Club. It still exists in its old state every first Thursday of every month. In the evening, you can go and have a really enjoyable evening.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
With
That's what we're looking for.
With Greek music. Gledi.
What else do you want?
Exactly.
Club. Yeah, look, I used to go back in the day as well. Great place. So if it's still the same... You could be going back, Tom. What do you reckon?
Yeah,
it's had a facelift, let's be honest.
Oh, then it can't be good.
Yeah.
It's not the original experience, right? No, we love it. Fantastic. Well, look, obviously we've all got sort of common backgrounds and whatnot, but I'm keen to hear, Arthur. I mean, what attracted you, as someone who grew up as a child of Greek migrants, what attracted you to be part of the political process here?
Well, I didn't set out to do that. When I was young, I was interested in politics, in news, current affairs, but I wasn't someone who woke up at the age of 15 saying, I want to be Prime Minister or anything like that.
Did you ever have aspirations for that?
No. But what happened was I started doing economics because I wanted to understand how the world worked, and economics is about applying policy to the real world, and that's what also attracted me initially to working in government. And then in the process of doing that, I met people who were associated with politics, and I got an offer to go and work for John Howard in the late 80s when he was opposition leader as his senior economic advisor. And I liked the idea because it puts you more at the coalface of decision-making, giving advice to a decision-maker when they're about to go on stage and make an announcement or whatever. So it was more direct than the work I was doing in the public service. And I liked the parliament. I was interested in the parliament. How it worked. And so I went to work for him, and that was the fork in the road that determined a lot of the rest of my career. Things sometimes happen by accident rather than design.
So, I mean, what a time to be a part of politics as well. We're talking about some of the most iconic names, let's say, of the last 40-odd years of Australian politics. You know, talking Howards, your Keatings are around, your Hawks and all that sort of thing. What was it like to be part of that?
In the old Parliament House, because that's where I started to work before we moved to the new one in 88.
Wow.
It was a small place. And so outside the Leader of the Opposition's office, there might be a men's room. You'd walk in the men's room and you'd have Ian Sinclair on one side, Bill Hayden on the other, right? Wow. Or you'd go down the corridor and you might see Bob Hawke, the Prime Minister, walking the other way.
Yep.
Or Keating talking to someone. So yes,
unbelievable.
It was funny. The people that you saw in the media or on TV were suddenly there in front of you, and you were sort of part of it, you know, sort of.
Well, we had the same sort of feeling just before we went on air because, just to give you an idea, so Arthur arrived here and actually did an interview just outside our studio here for the project for Channel 10.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Same sort of feeling that we just had. we get a similar sort of feel, I guess.
Yeah, it was funny.
Definitely. So what was it like working for John Howard all these years? Because I understand when he went into politics, I think he missed out on the first 2 elections for Prime Minister.
So, yeah, he lost the 87 election, and then in 89 he lost his job. I worked for him for that period in opposition, and then went back to work for him in 95 in opposition on economic stuff until he became Prime Minister. The first time around, I mean, I got on with him pretty well. At the end of the interview, when he first met me, which wasn't about economics, it was more about what I'm about, what do I think about things. He asked me, are you married? And at that stage I wasn't. And he said, well, this job will do nothing for your prospects. So I sort of liked his sense of humour, you know?
Yeah.
And
Fiona's laughing.
and in that period, I sort of got to see that he was serious about what he was doing.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a game. He saw politics not as a game, but as a craft. And he had ideas. And I admired that. And that was one of the reasons why I felt comfortable going to work for him. And he was prepared to fight for ideas, even if at the time they weren't popular. And of course, he got a lot of pushback from people about some of the stuff that he was saying or promoting. But that didn't stop him. If he thought it was the right thing to do, he stood up for what he believed in, for his values.
Yes.
And I thought that showed courage. I thought that showed integrity. And I found him, in that sense, a very good boss. Always really well-mannered. I remember hearing a story, I think it was from him. He was in the cinema when he was 12 years old, and he was throwing Maltesers down the centre aisle or something, and his mother sort of gave him a clip or sort of corrected him or told him, take your feet off this or that. I mean, he was brought up to be well-mannered, and that came across in how he related to people, how he treated people. He showed people respect, and people responded to that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that just for our North American listeners, our cinemas used to have hardwood floors, so dropping a Maltese now would bounce, make a lot of racket. But more importantly...
You're showing your age here, mate.
I am, I know. He's actually a Dragon supporter, would you believe? And I've seen him here at Cogger Oval.
So am I, actually.
Are you?
Because I grew up
What
in
a
the era
champ.
when the Dragons had won 10 or 11 premierships in a row. And
Your stocks have just gone down with me, Arthur.
What a legend.
So even though I grew up in Newcastle, I was a Dragons supporter. It's been a bit dry lately, but...
We're back, don't worry. We'll be back.
No,
this
but
year,
it's
so
great. We're
okay.
brothers now.
We're
brothers.
related now. That's
You're out. You're gone.
I know. I'm a
you-
South
South.
man,
Oh,
so...
okay.
South, come on.
You, Fiona?
No, Bulldogs.
Bulldogs.
Oh, we've got a
Yeah.
mix here. That's okay. At least they're all
Bulldogs.
Sydney clubs. You know?
Yeah, but
Bulldogs
more
and
importantly,
Mongols.
John Howard was actually born in Earlwood, so we've had a lot of famous guests from Earlwood.
Barton.
Exactly.
go. He's one of
And
us.
actually, not far from where I lived in Oldwood for a few years. And his house, I'm told, is where the KFC now stands.
Yes.
you go.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's right. The original house, yes.
So every time we'd go past, it's like, that's where, because he was Prime Minister at the time that we were living there. It's like, that's where the Prime Minister grew up. It's like
Yeah.
the KFC.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Did he sell it to the KFC?
Who
Or his
knows?
parents, maybe. I don't know.
Exactly.
It was a service station in his time.
Oh, was it really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Well, I have to ask, because the period that you're talking about here with John Howard in opposition, this is back into the 80s, early 90s and whatnot. The period that we're talking about here for Nick and I, there was still an element of a little bit of racism towards Greeks that is not as prevalent now. Did you ever experience any of that whilst going through the political system?
Not through the political system. I mean, when I was growing up in Newcastle, there were times when if you were Greek or Italian, you were called a wog. So you were aware that maybe there's a difference. I don't think at school I was discriminated against, but it was embarrassing if you went to school with those Vienna loaves with feta, cheese and other stuff on them.
All the stuff that's on the table.
It was all a bit like that. That didn't add to the feeling of assimilation or integration, I have to say. But no, I didn't feel that discrimination going up through the political system. And in fact, there was a turning point in the early 80s when Australia started to adopt a policy of multiculturalism, which was trying to recognise the fact that you had all these cultures that had come from different parts of the world, and that the message was you can be an Australian but have a heritage from somewhere else. And that the things that bound us together as Australians were obviously greater than the things that disunited us, but that part of that was as long as you believed in democracy, the rule of law, English as the primary language, you could have whatever culture, artistic heritage you wanted, practice whatever religion you wanted. In fact, I think the thing people forget is that inherent in this British set of institutions, if you like, is the idea that you have freedom of speech, you have freedom of association, you can be who you want to be. There's no there's no cookie cutter, if you like, example of what an Australian is.
Is that unique to Australia, or is that something that is, that others are trying as well?
Well, we in Canada have had explicit policies of multiculturalism. They're very much a migrant country. The US is different. First of all, there was a period between the 20s and the 60s where they had stopped all migration, interestingly enough. Wow. But they used to go on the basis of being the melting pot, that you went there and you mixed in with everybody else, and what came out the other side was an American who believed in the flag, the Constitution, whatever. It wasn't mandatory because it's a free country, but it was very strong, the feeling that I am an American. It was partly linked to the fact that America is a strong, big country, the idea of America as being exceptional. So migrants like the idea of being recognised as, yes, I'm now an American.
So how does that fit in, though, with, I don't know if America still has the policy of if you become a US citizen, you're relinquishing any previous dual citizenship. Is that a thing? Or?
I'm not sure. I don't think it's rigid. I mean, what the current administration in Washington are trying to do is, apart from dealing with illegal immigration, they've been talking about taking away birthright citizenship, where if you're born in the US, you get citizenship. So there are some changes potentially coming, but for most of the time, I think the US has been conscious that it's a strength to actually have people come from all parts of the world. So they've had a lot of Chinese, they've had a lot of Indians in recent times, and that's actually made Silicon Valley innovation even bigger than it was otherwise going to be. So that's one of the strengths of the US, attracting all these people from all over the world who become entrepreneurs. Elon Musk is another example, originally from South Africa. That's a strength of the US, and I hope they never lose that.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Looking for the perfect way to say I love you, thank you, or to just brighten someone's day? With Mr. Roses, you can say all that and more with their stunning range of luxurious, long-lasting roses, handpicked for their beauty and elegance. And the best part? With same-day delivery available, you can send that special someone the perfect gift, even at the last minute. Visit mrroses.com.au now to find that perfect gift for that perfect someone. Mr. Roses, proud sponsors of the Uzo Talk podcast.
Crazy Productions presents Thanasis Vasilakos and Master Tempo, direct from Greece, live in Sydney for a massive 4-hour show on Friday, 16th of May at Canterbury Hurlstone Park RSL Club. Tickets are selling fast. Call 0418 451 481 to book today.
There's no Uzo talk without a bottle of Uzo, which is why we love the Greek providor. Get a real taste of the very best produce that Greece has to offer. From olive oils and delicious artisan sweets to unique spirits, earthy herbs and memorable wines. Visit thegreekprovidor.com.au to see their amazing range. The Greek Providor, proud sponsors of the Uzo Talk podcast.
Yeah, definitely. Look, just before we get onto the current US administration, I had one question around John Howard when he was in power.
Yeah.
He introduced the very controversial at the time, the new gun laws.
Yep.
What was that like going through that experience and the kickback that you had and the challenges you faced?
First and foremost, he's not a gun person himself. Members of the coalition in the National Party, a lot of them are farmers and whatever on the land, they were more used to having guns. So he tended to always identify with the more urban perspective on guns, which was the public safety issue. So then when we had the Port Arthur massacre, he realised that was a turning point. The Australians, didn't like the idea that this character could have this automatic rifle and be able to basically cut up 35 people in the way that he did. So that became a catalyst to doing something about it. And it became bipartisan with Kim Beazley and I think Cheryl Kernow at the time. Yes. So on one level, it was a no-brainer and most people agreed with it. The challenge for John Howard was his National Party coalition partners, and here he got great help from the late, great Tim Fischer. They were saying, well, yes, but we use our guns to hunt, we use our guns to protect ourselves, we're not going to go out and massacre people. So the really challenging job was to convince the people inside the coalition that this should be done. And he did that because he knew right was on his side. And I remember years later he went to the US and spoke at the opening, I think it was, of the George W. Bush Presidential Library. And he talked about achievements of Bush, and then he talked about things we'd worked on with Australia. And then he also US had worked with Australia. Then he mentioned, and we in Australia tightened the gun laws. Well, it was like the air was let out of the balloon because, of course, we're talking about Texans.
Yeah, definitely.
So a little footnote. I was in a pharmacy in Washington, D.C., upstairs, buying some stuff, and a guy who looked like he was homeless walked in and started taking stuff, packing it away, and then started hoofing for the door. So the shop assistant saw him and went running after him. And there was a guy in front of me in the queue to pay. And he turned around and he said, well, in Texas, we would have shot him first and then asked to see what was going on. But that is the mentality. They identify very strongly with guns in the US. It's the Second Amendment to the Constitution. They have a right to bear arms. They see that as protection against the government. And one further little footnote, when Obama was president, for whatever reason, gun sales went through the roof.
Really?
Yeah. Some Americans, particularly those obviously who are Republicans or rednecks, for want of a better description, a separate group, I'm not saying Republicans are, seem to be worried about their security. And gun purchases went down when Trump became president after Obama.
Wow. How's that for a stat?
Very.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, look, I was in Dallas for work. It was really odd. We went to a local bar. It was like they serve meats and whatever and had like a live band, whatever you call it. And I remember we met a couple of locals and they all had guns on them. I said, the rule is they can't have bullets in the guns while they're in an establishment.
Yes.
And I said, and I was half pissed. I said, really? They show me. And he did. He showed me he had a handgun. I thought, wow, these guys are serious. And at the same time, we actually went to a gun shop. And I said to my mate that was with me, my colleague, I said, look, let's pretend we're going to go buy a gun, see how easy it is. We went up to the counter and I said, look, if I want to purchase that gun, what do you need from me? And they said I need a license. And he goes, if you go to that red phone there, you pick up the red phone, they'll ask you a couple of questions. In 5 minutes, they'll give you a license and you can buy the gun. It was like that easy. And I thought, wow, it's crazy.
Unbelievable.
Anyway, true story.
Give us an idea of the kind of advice that was being given to the Prime Minister at that time. Obviously, you had the coalition, members of the coalition, they're saying this is a bad idea because it doesn't really represent many of our constituents. But I heard someone describe it as political suicide to put a law like that in. What were people saying internally?
Once the Prime Minister had decided this was a good way to go, he persuaded the party room that this should happen. Then the whole process was how to implement this. So he had to start to understand how guns worked. How do you potentially crimp guns so that they don't shoot or whatever? He had to learn all these technicalities so he would be able to debate the issue with people out there. So there was a lot of preparation actually behind the scenes to get him up to speed. It wasn't so much my job. I was on the economic side. But we had to bring people in to help him with all of that. There was a guy called Cliff, something or other, I forget his name now. He was like the armourer down in the department, and he had to be brought up to explain how all this worked.
Wow, okay. So you got your expert there, with all his array of toys.
Yeah, so essentially explaining.
How did he get through security that day?
Yeah, well, he had a few guns on him. He did blast his way through.
Jeez.
Wow, there you go.
And again, this is a very interesting time in Australian politics, and for you to be around it. But the gun control issue, obviously, as Nick has raised, two big things as part of the Howard government was the GST and work choices, which I assume you would have had a little bit to do with. How big were those things? I remember people losing their minds around the GST.
Well, there's a book somewhere which quotes something I said around that time, which was basically we had let loose King Kong and he was climbing the Empire State Building.
Wow.
The King Kong being the GST. And the point of what I said was we're sort of in uncharted waters here. Houston got sunk on the GST, but we tried to learn from that experience. And the reason we were doing it was because too much Australian tax was being levied on income.
Right.
And there had to be a way to relieve that. And the idea was levy the tax more when people are spending rather than when they're earning income, because it might actually encourage people to actually earn more, be more productive, keep more in their pocket, And then if they spend, well, that's a different proposition. So we had to rebalance the tax system. It was getting too unbalanced. But it was a challenge because politically people worried about price increases and all the rest of it. So what we did is we studied everything that Houston tried to do on this and then tried to work out the areas where there was a problem. And Costello and Howard convened a little group that I was part of that basically met almost every week for a year in 1997, 98, trying to work out a package. So when we went to the public, we could say that a keg of beer will not increase by more than X. Fuel excise will be cut, so there's no increase in your petrol price, etc., to try and head off any possible argument against it. Very intensive period. And I remember we just launched it in 1998, and it was when we were about to go to an election, and everybody, Costello, Howard, had been on radio, done their pitch, it was all fine. Tim Fisher had done an interview somewhere, and there was some glitch, and the PM was like, a bit nervy about this happening. And he called Tim Fisher down. And Fisher was very smart. What he did is he came down and he had his newborn son in his arms. So Howard sees the baby. So all thoughts about the GST go out the door and he starts talking about the baby. And that's how Fisher diffused the situation.
Wow. Deflection. How good's that?
It was a very classy deflection.
This is fantastic.
Yeah. But look, he put a lot on the table to get the GST through. We just barely survived the election.
Yes.
It was our first election. And then we had to get the thing implemented through Parliament, which meant negotiating with parties on the crossbench. Then we had to get the thing introduced to the public in 2000. Then we had to monitor the implementation. Then we had to win the election in 2001 to make sure the thing was not reversed by Labor. So the whole thing took 3 or 4 years as a reform. Work choices is different. We won the 2004 election and unexpectedly won the Senate. So we said, well, how are we going to use the mandate in the Senate? We don't want to waste it like the Fraser years. That was the view in the mind of Howard and others who'd served in that period. So on industrial relations, we basically packaged up all the laws that hadn't been passed before by the Senate. But the problem was the way we shaped the package, there was no explicit safety net. We just assumed, because the market for labour was strong at the time, people would not go backwards, but there was no guarantee. Whereas before there'd been a guarantee, we'd made a guarantee no one can go backwards, they can only go forwards. So that became the fatal flaw in the work choices piece, and I was part of that process. I take my share of responsibility. The funny thing was that Labor were attacking the policy and its impact before it had even been implemented, right? So, but this is about perception, and it was a lesson to me about the politics of perception that if you go out there and say this has happened because of this policy, people are likely to believe you if you say it loud and long enough. And it did have that impact on work choices. And I remember a friend of mine in the office saying to me afterwards, or saying to other people, this was like trying to sell cancer. I said, oh, thanks, mate. Anyway.
I can't help but think, though, sorry, Nick, a few years back, you wouldn't remember this, we've actually met before briefly, Arthur. It was actually at SBS.
Do you owe me money? Are you that guy?
I do. That's him. That guy.
The guy from Corfu.
That's it. No.
I thought I recognised you. You're looking prosperous now.
I
Where's
know,
my
right?
money?
I know.
Got all this fancy equipment? What's
know.
going on?
Yeah,
Mate,
invested
you
well.
paid for all of it. We were actually in the same studio for the SBS Insight story on the Greek crisis. I think it was like 2015 or so.
Yeah.
Talking about what you were just talking about, the level of research, the amount of work and the years that went into putting those economic safeguards in place and initiatives. And then looking at something like what was happening in Greece during the economic crisis. What was your thought? And what was your feeling looking at that as an outsider and saying, because most of us were saying in that room, what the hell is going on there?
Look, it was tough for Greece. It's sort of recovered now, but it's been through a really bad time. And we're talking 12, 14 years of this now.
Yep.
Greece did not get much of a free ride from the EU on this. The Germans in particular are very keen that the Greeks adjust, tighten their belts. But it was very tough. And I remember the stories about the impoverishment that happened in Greece as a result, a first world country, and what had happened to Greece. That's the time the Hellenic Initiative was created to try and help Greece through that crisis. And even by 2015, we were still, dealing with the impact of it. And Tsipras, the then Prime Minister, is on the other side of politics, but I have to say he had to take some pretty tough decisions, which have borne fruit, and that was important. But I often wonder in my own mind whether things might have been different if the EU had taken a different approach. As a footnote, when the Asian financial crisis hit, countries in Southeast Asia were hit very hard, including Indonesia, and Australia were worried about the impact on Indonesia. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, went in there and said, you've got to take your medicine as an economy, you've got to raise food prices, energy prices, you've got to cut subsidies, this, that, the other. And that precipitated not quite a revolution, but revolutionary conditions. And the military dictator, Suharto, lost his position. So we actually intervened with the IMF because we could see the social impact this was going to have, and we were part of a bailout of Indonesia. It wasn't without conditions, right? The point was, well, you're not just going to go back to doing things the way you were, but we helped soften it.
Yep.
And I often wonder with Greece whether that would have been a better path than the path that Greece ended up taking. But unfortunately, Greece was at the mercy of the bigger powers in Europe as part of the EU, and so it was forced to take its medicine in a pretty tough way.
Wow. So how do you see Greece now in 2025?
Well,
economically,
look, from the outside, it's a really good recovery. It's seen as a well-performing economy. I think last year it got an award for being the best performing economy in Europe. But that's off the back of a very tough adjustment period. The Prime Minister, Mitsotakis, is very popular in the West. He's Western educated. He speaks the language of business, having had a business background himself. So he knows how to sell Greece as a place to invest and do things in. And Greece actually has an exciting future. I've been talking to some people in Greece lately about LNG pipelines that can come through Greece, which can help to supply LNG, liquefied natural gas, to Europe, which are alternatives to coming through Russia and other places. So there's a lot of good prospects for Greece, and I'm hoping that continues.
Fantastic.
There you go. Place to invest. What do you reckon, Tom?
Absolutely. Take that money you still owe me and put it there. Yeah, that's the spirit.
I think he has.
I was hoping you'd forget that, Arthur.
Yeah, right.
A couple of units in Kolonaki, haven't you?
Kolonaki and Corfu. Yeah, you can stay there. Don't worry.
Thanks, mate.
Well, look, you've had an amazing career, 11 years with John Howard. And by the way, for our North American friends, John Howard was Prime Minister for 11 years straight, which is some sort of a record, I think, or it's up there.
Yeah, second longest serving.
Years.
There you go. And he's our oldest living ex-Prime Minister as well, I believe.
Yeah, he's still around.
Yeah.
Sharp as a tack.
Actually, he was on a show recently, and I was thinking that. I'm like, how old is this bloke? He's looking fighting fit.
85.
Wow.
Yeah,
he's doing really well.
He's done well. Well, you actually moved on to an ambassador role in the US as well.
Yeah.
So what was that like, transitioning?
Well, I'd been sick, so I had to take medical leave from the Parliament. So when I came back, it was either go into a ministry or take a job outside. And I spoke with Scott Morrison about it. I wanted to go back to the cabinet, but at that stage there weren't many options in cabinet. So he suggested maybe then an ambassadorship. He started with Greece. I said, well, that's a bit stereotypical. And he came back later and said, what about America? And I talked to my wife, Elizabeth, and I'd been offered America before in 2005, and I turned it down because I thought I was too young to be an ambassador. But clearly not too young in 2019, and Elizabeth would have killed me if I had turned it down a second time. So I took it. Sure, it was an adjustment, but I was ready for the adjustment. Now, I'd worked in the private sector before, so it wasn't as if I just spent my whole life in the bureaucracy or in politics. But it was an adjustment. I was the head of the embassy, over 300 people in DC, plus another couple of hundred throughout the US. So I had an administrative role, as well as sort of a policy role, a representational role. When you're ambassador, you're on show 24/7. You're representing your country. You're your country's highest representative in that country. So it had some similarities with politics and with being a minister. You're out there talking to people. You're out there talking about policy. You're doing media.
You're taking photos with Donald Trump.
Absolutely, all of that. So that adjustment wasn't too bad, actually. And we got to live at a very nice residence, White Oaks in DC. It's on a very big block. It's a very beautiful place. So that was a bonus as well.
I mean, what does it say about you as an individual? And this is a question for everyone else in there, not for you, Arthur. You can't comment on this. But like, to be given the opportunity to be ambassador to Greece, where I would suspect it's fairly comfortable. It's a culture and a heritage that you're familiar with. You could probably have given something unique to that. And then saying you can either be ambassador to them or you can be ambassador to probably our most important strategic relationship with all this added pressure. Who wants that?
Oh, it's a testament to the caliber of Arthur and what he brings to Australia and the dedication and sacrifice, because there's a lot of sacrifice. He's very humble, and he never really goes on about the health and the sacrifice to his family in general to serve Australia, and that's what he's done.
To put on the record as well, obviously you overcame a cancer battle.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. In fact,
amazing.
We met straight after that in 2019. But Fiona's prepared to take it on. No, with your eyes open, you've seen the sacrifices, you've seen what people go through, but you're prepared to do it because you want to serve, you want to help, you want to. You've got that in you, so that's why I'm very supportive of Fiona. I think she's got not only a lot of talent, but she's doing it for the right reasons. Right?
Yeah, and that's exactly why I'm asking that question, because in many ways, these types of positions, it's a poison chalice. You've got a lot of responsibility. You are the go-to person for all of these things. What kind of person do you need to be able to want a position like that? I can't see you getting a lot of sleep.
And then there are megalomaniacs who love it because they're the center of attention.
Well, I think it's more the center of attention wears out because there's a lot of stress, and you need tenacity, perseverance, but also a willingness to just give back and serve the people of Australia. I'm coming from a perspective of I'm extremely grateful to my forebears, my Greek ancestors, my yaya papu who came here, and to the people that have served before me. And I actually would like to give back. This has been a 12-year journey, so it didn't happen overnight, this desire to give back to and be part of federal politics. I started off as in the Small Business Party with Angela Vathoukas, because small business is really the lifeblood of every migrant community and the lifeblood of Australia. And I wanted to give small business owners, sole traders, entrepreneurs, startups a voice. So that's where I'm coming from, and that's evolved. And I also bring experience from 15 years of tech sales, and I'm now in Microsoft working alongside the largest companies in Australia, Telstra, BHP, Rio. So I also have that understanding and that business acumen to bring to a political career, as well as grassroots knowledge as being a Bayside councillor.
Yes.
And under the tutelage of Arthur for over 5 years or 6 years. It's been such an honour, but I've learnt a lot, and I've also learnt about the commitment, tenacity, perseverance that it takes day in and day out. Like Arthur doesn't stop.
And he can back a winner.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Look, there's no more glowing endorsement than Arthur for you, Fiona. And you've had to go at state politics, local politics as well.
So yeah, I was fortunate to be elected to Bayside Council recently at the last local election, which we are sitting in right now, which I'm extremely grateful also to the Greek community for the support over the years. And I'm very proud of my Greek heritage as well.
There's so many Greeks in this area. And in Barton, obviously, the lines have been slightly redrawn in recent years.
All of Elwood.
Yes, which is all Greek.
Yes, all of Elwood, Brighton, Sanssouci, Cogra Bay, Roselands, Canterbury, parts of Canterbury, Kingsgrove, Bexley.
I mean, that must be pushing as one of the most densely populated Greek areas in Australia, surely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
outside
it would be,
of Melbourne.
I think it would be the biggest, certainly in New South Wales.
Wow.
So, I think having studied Greek and very proud of my Greek heritage, being to university in Greece as well, I can bring a lot of empathy and understanding of what the Greek Australian society requires as well.
Definitely. Look, there's nothing better than one of our own, Tom, in politics.
And there is a lot of them. Obviously, we spoke earlier about the one that's just retired, obviously, in the last, I think it's the last 24 hours from the Labor Party as well. And, there are current people, Sophie Kotsis, obviously, in New South Wales Parliament, who's in the Labor Party as well. So on all sides of the political spectrum, there are Greek Australians who are being part of this process. And, I mean, I want to ask the two of you now, I mean, knowing that this is a system that, is rooted in ancient Greek ideals and that heritage, how proud does it make you to know that you are the torchbearers, let's say, within the Australian community for that?
Great question.
Well, I mean, in my case, in my first speech, my maiden speech, I made reference to Greece as the cradle of democracy. And then Joe Hockey interjected and said, and we're still paying for it because of the bailouts or whatever. So irreverent.
Sticky bugger.
Bloody, I'll get him. But he still owes me money too.
He does too. But I'll tell you something. Stephen Fry sat in that chair right there, and he is famous for having said, we will never, no matter how much the sovereign debt crisis means Greece may owe the world, we will never be able to pay the debt that we owe Greece.
That was Stephen Fry.
That was Stephen Fry.
You've had Stephen Fry here.
He sat right there.
That's fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah.
So,
that's amazing.
No, legend.
Well, Greece, certainly, and ancient Greece, but even to this day has and continues to give the world a lot. And it's actually giving, in the last 10 to 15 years, a lot of its youth. There's a massive brain drain that is a fallout from the economic crisis. And it's very sad to see that because it's similar to a repeat of what happened in the 1950s, where all the youth came from the islands here. So Greece continues to give a lot around the world. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that and we support Greece as well, wherever we can.
Well, I think it's amazing in the last, I mean, my grandparents, for example, who were part of that sort of generation who came in the 50s and 60s, consecutive premiers and prime ministers and whatnot have been nice enough to send messages to those people to say, it's on the backs of migrants like yourselves that we've built this country. How true is that, and how important is the migrant to a country like Australia? Not just Australia, but also the US and the UK, where Greeks have gone for the last 60 odd years.
Well, I mean, Australia is an immigrant nation. Indigenous people came here 40, 60,000 years ago, the oldest group in the world. Then we had the British settlement, and then we had the waves of migration. So this country has been built by migrants, and Sir Robert Menzies, who was Australia's longest serving Prime Minister, always made that point. It was a nation of migrants. What's happened more recently is, because of debates about whether it's boat people or about some of the waves of migration we're seeing into Europe, illegal waves of immigration, and now we've seen the issues in the US with borders, the whole issue of immigration has been tipped on its head.
Sure.
After the war, we did a lot to accommodate displaced people throughout the world, on top of the legal migration that came. Circumstances seem to have changed a bit, but we should never forget the fact that immigration has made Australia what it is today and what it will be over the next few years. And there's no fixed Australian culture. It evolves as every wave of migration comes through.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll just say to that point, small businesses are the ones that really allow migrants to find their feet as soon as they arrive in Australia, and to also realise the Australian dream by having their own business. A lot of them don't end up in multinational companies. It's mainly the second generation that does. So small businesses need to be supported, and that's where government, and that's what I intend to do if elected, that really ensure that small businesses, sole traders, and our entrepreneurial community are provided with policies that support and are guided. and not just left to risk everything without any great return. So that's something that I want to advocate for very strongly if elected at the next federal election. And I just want to do a shout out to all the recent Greek arrivals, my partner included, who are contributing, very silent, but contributing very hard to the Australian community, and sometimes get lost within the many myriads of Greeks that have been here since the 50s. But I just want to give a shout out to them, and they're doing sometimes a lot of work and go unrecognised.
Your partner, my wife as well. She's counted among that particular group as well.
So the Greek immigration has not stopped, still going.
No, definitely.
Yeah, well done, well said.
And you think about those small businesses as well. Like, I dare say everyone here has had some kind of a connection to either a fish and chip shop, a milk bar, or something along those lines. You know, you're right. I mean, it's what that community has sort of built itself up on, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to change tact a little bit. So I want to go back to what you mentioned about Trump and Arthur. So
hot topic.
Yeah. So I know we're running a little bit of time, but Arthur, what was it like when you met Trump for the first time?
Well, I met him to present my credentials, because as an ambassador, you meet in this case, the president. There's a note that you present saying, I'm the new ambassador on the block from Australia. There was a batch of 5 of us that went up, including the new Greek ambassador, Alexandra Papadopoulou, at the time. That was great to go up with her. So when I went up to see him, he was friendly. He wanted to talk about the bushfires. We just had bushfires in Australia. He had a theory that there was too much stuff left on the ground in the national parks, and that was causing the bushfires. I tried to steer him away from that because the cameras were on, and it might look like I was blaming the greenies for all the fires in Australia. I didn't want to quite go there. So we got on to talking about, burning back practices and all that sort of stuff. And then Elizabeth came on to join the picture, and he looks around, he looks at her, and so like he completely deviated then. Sure. So looking at her, then he looked back at me and he said, I'm proud of you. And I'm saying, what's he being proud about? I'm not quite sure. Maybe it was Elizabeth. He thought I underrated this guy.
Wow, you got more respect that way.
Yeah, I got more respect that way, I think.
How professional, but how so Trump as well.
So, but he could say, but perfectly fine, perfectly charming. Yep. But I think, look, he's the sort of leader that if he wants something, then he'll go after it like a bulldozer. Yeah. As we've seen recently with Panama, Greenland, Canada, Australia, steel and aluminium tariffs, etc., etc. We just have to accept that that's his modus operandi. Yeah. It doesn't mean we have to run around with our hair on fire. We just got to work out. It's like having a new customer, right? Yeah. You got to work out, well, what buttons do you push with the new customer to get what you need out of them?
And
right?
How far can you push them?
And how do you frame things? I mean, you're in sales, how do you frame things in a way that the other person can see the mutual benefit? And the other advice we give people from Australia about dealing with the Trump administration or with Trump, don't go in there defensive, go in there confident, go in there with a proposition, put something on the table. We can do this, we can do that, etc. We can work together on this. You're dealing with business people. You're dealing with real estate developers from New York who are used to having a bit of a contretemps, work something out, and then at the end of it, you shake on it or whatever. You go off, have a beer or whatever, and then you get on to the next thing. I think the thing he doesn't like is people who just act very defensively. You just got to be able to
be
confident and step up.
See everything as making a deal.
That's his.
Definitely.
He believes that's possible on anything.
Yeah. So do you think the current US administration will have some impact on the Australian elections coming up?
It's a good question because it depends partly on whether they think that Trump is operating in a way that they don't like, and that therefore, in a sense, they're voting for an Australian way of doing things rather than the Trump way of doing things. That might be a factor if, for example, the opposition, if Peter Dutton were to say, well, I'm basically the Australian Trump, but he's not going to say that. Australians like their politicians to be authentic. Dutton has to be what he is. He's a conservative. He believes in institutions. He believes in the parliament. He believes in the parliamentary party. Very different kettle of fish to someone like Donald Trump. He's got to be himself and put up policies that reflect his strengths, like he's done on things like nuclear power, on around policing, cop on the beat, based on his own background. The challenge for Albanese is that if he were to say, well, I'm going to make this election a referendum on Trump, he's got to be able to then portray Dutton as being an extension of Trump. And that's why I think Dutton should not fall for that trap. And in Albanese's case, he's basically got to leverage the risk of Dutton being elected, whereas Peter Dutton's job is to say, well, do you feel better off than you were 3 years ago? What about your cost of living? What about energy prices, et cetera, et cetera?
So Trump's really big on tariffs. We hear him say he's going to hit tariffs for China, and now just mentioned to Australia. How much of that is, say, a bluff to get countries or industries to change before they actually put tariffs in?
Some of it is a negotiating ploy, but he believes in tariffs. He says tariffs are the most beautiful word in the English language. He believes that tariffs raise revenue, that the tariffs, if he puts tariffs on the Chinese, they're somehow paid by the Chinese. They're not. They're paid in prices in the US by US consumers. That's how it works. It's like a retail sales tax in a way. But people in his camp want to use tariffs to actually, as they see it, reindustrialize America, promote more manufacturing in America. So while some of it is a negotiating ploy, he actually does want higher tariffs. And the way he's going about it, he's putting a particular tariff on China. He's now talking about what he calls reciprocal tariffs. If other countries have high tariffs on America compared to the tariffs America has on them, he'll lift the tariff in America to match what the other country is levying. So he really believes in it. It's not all bluff. Take him. Look, with Trump, when he speaks, take him seriously, because if there's a way he can achieve what he's saying, he will try and do it. Look at Gaza. Look at other elements of policy.
Yeah.
Well, that was going to be my question about Gaza. I mean, how much of that do you think? I mean, what does that do for the world order that the US is saying that, we want to potentially own this, and we're going to go through and potentially take over the Gaza Strip. Again, how much of this is a negotiating tool?
Yeah, but I'm not quite sure what he's negotiating to, because the plan itself would be hard to implement. The Egyptians and the Jordanians are not very keen to do anything on that, except more refugees from Gaza. The Saudi Arabians believe in a two-state solution, a state for the Palestinians. They've made that very clear. The idea that America could have boots on the ground in the Middle East again, given that he said no more forever wars, he was referring to Iraq and Afghanistan, that could be an issue for him. I don't think he wants to be in a situation where he has to put boots on the ground. So he's hoping that he can persuade people through a combination of money and other leverage he may have over them to do what he wants. But I think it's a really hard ask. If you're the Prime Minister of Israel, he had to sort of go along with it at the press conference, but that's not really the outcome they're after.
It was very interesting, wasn't it?
I mean, the Israelis are after an outcome where they neutralize Hamas, and basically Gaza can't be used to launch attacks against Israel.
It was a very interesting press conference. I mean, just some of the facial expressions during that. I mean, that's what I was going to say in terms of like how President Trump, sort of portrays himself. Is there anyone that's sort of comparable in in your experience in politics that you can sort of compare him to? I mean, he comes across in, some people call him abrasive, some people call,
I think he's a one-off.
Yeah.
I really do. I was saying to someone today, he's a bit like Kerry Packer. He's a rich man who has...
That's a good analogy, actually.
Who has a common touch. Like Kerry Packer was very good at picking trends in media that people out there were interested in. And he did that for a long time. He also, by the way, believed in tariffs.
Yeah,
there you go. Very strongly.
That's a great comment.
But
that's a great analogy.
Yeah, well done. That makes sense.
Trump in politics is a bit of a one-off. Don't underestimate his skills as a politician. Yeah.
No, well, he won, the most popular vote, so he won it again. I was going to ask something a bit more closer to home. So with the America First policy that Trump has, what's the security concern in Australia and the Asia Pacific for us, do you think?
Well, the concern would be how reliable is America going to be as an ally going forward if it's America First. Now, they have bases around the world. Is that going to continue? At one stage, there was talk of other countries had to pay more for having American soldiers there. Now, we have American soldiers up north, where in the Northern Territory, we're hosting them. but I don't know that we see ourselves as necessarily having to pay for them because, yes, they're here and they help with our security. But the point we're trying to make to the administration in Washington is that the security of the US is tied up with our security in the Indo-Pacific. It's of mutual benefit to have this. I don't think it's right to say to them, we need you. We should be saying, you need us. This is how we help you and your security ultimately in the world and against China.
But so hopefully no changes then with the new administration coming in. Okay. He did make a comment as well, about drilling for oil, fossil fuels. Drill, baby, drill. Yeah. So what does that mean now for climate change? Do you see any change for the current climate change trajectory that we're on?
Look, it will have an impact. Some countries will follow his lead, I've no doubt. But there's such a wall of money now going into green investment that I think that momentum will continue. Plus, the Chinese have seen an opportunity to fill the gap left by the lack of US leadership, and they're trying to push their own approach on climate, as they will on other issues where they think the US is dropping the ball and dropping out of meetings and organisations. The US has also dropped out of the World Health Organization. The problem is, if you want to reform something or change something, the best way to do it is from within. That's the argument. Now, he may argue, I'll get out and they'll see that they can't survive without us and then we'll have leverage. We'll see.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so one last question on Trump for me. Do you think it's a good thing that Trump's in power for Australia? Are we going to benefit economically, financially from it? Short term or long term?
In terms of what he wants to do in America, he wants to deregulate, he wants to encourage investment in America. If he reforms the federal government, makes it easier for us to do business with America, all of that may create opportunities.
Okay, there you go. Opportunities, Tom, in the US for Australia.
Only time will tell. These are the discussions that we have every day. The burning questions.
Well, you've got all that money you've taken from other people. You need to find a home. Yeah, I know. I know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, it was a question for Tom, actually. It was, how are you going to invest it?
How are you going to invest that money you siphoned?
So what involvement do you have now? So you're still living in Washington, you said?
Yeah, I'm with the Asia Group, which helps businesses that want to do business in Asia, American companies that want to go to Asia, multinationals that have a footprint in the region, maybe have issues dealing with government, policy issues, regulatory issues, assessing the geopolitical risk of operating in the region because of the US-China dynamic. And so we help them understand what their options are for dealing with this, what the impact might be on their operations, their supply chains, what are the alternatives. So we have offices in Hong Kong, Shanghai, Mumbai, Delhi, Taiwan, Taipei in Taiwan, Bangkok, Tokyo, Hanoi, Singapore. Wow. And we've got 3 people in Australia now, in Melbourne, Canberra and Sydney. We're sort of gearing up to do more, and we've recruited new people, some of whom have come out of the existing administration, but they're also the people who are experts in some element of dealing with Asia.
So how does it feel for you now? I mean, going from being an ambassador and being involved in Australian politics to being in the position you are now, is there? I mean, do you miss it at all in terms of
when I walk
excitement?
When I walk out the door and the car isn't waiting, it's a bit like, hey, what's happened here? Where's my driver?
Yeah.
How am I gonna do this? Or I walk into a lift and I wait for someone to push the button. So where's the person to push the button?
Wow.
I've doubled up as your driver sometimes.
Yes, you have. You do a relatively good job. Yeah. But
someone to play theme music as well.
But because I'd been in the private sector before, I sort of understood the transition back. Yep. And the family are happy to be in Washington. So I've got a son at university there. My wife likes the States. And so, yeah.
Is that home now for you? Or
for now, yes, it is. I don't know what the future holds, but for now, that's home. And as long as Mr. Trump will allow us to stay.
And obviously, as a sideline to that, mentoring people like Fiona and people in, trying to get into politics. I mean, how important is that for you to be able to impart the knowledge that you have to the next generation?
Well, I think for anybody as they get older, being able to pass on experiences and help younger people navigate what's ahead is good. One thing that Paul Keating did when he was in his late teens, early 20s, when he was thinking about politics, he used to go and meet with people who newly retired from a particular industry, because he said he always got the best insights from people who just retired, had nothing to prove, could be entirely frank, and he got really good advice and whatever. I found it very interesting.
That is.
So
That's a great
being able
tip.
to learn is important.
And I met you just when you had retired and you were about to become ambassador. So it was very interesting insights that you were able to impart. At least you didn't say, don't do it. Most people say that.
There's an expression from Wayne Bennett, the football coach, don't die with the music in you.
Nice.
Yeah.
And that's a piece of advice I got when I was thinking about going into politics. And that's probably one of the reasons why I chose US over Greece as a place to be an ambassador, because there was still something in me about contributing to the bigger picture, the broader policy architecture.
Fantastic.
I like the saying that you can sit on the sidelines or you can actually get on the pitch and start playing yourself. So that's what I use, that analogy.
There you go. See, we got into sport already, Tom.
That's it. Well, we've mentioned our teams. We've mentioned Wayne Bennett, who's obviously coaching South this year. These are all analogies that resonate.
And look, the cucumbers and the tomatoes, you are sending a message.
I am sending a message.
Red and green. I realise that now. Subliminal, but it's there.
Oh, there you go. See, you picked that up already.
Absolutely. To sort of start wrapping this up, I mean, you mentioned a great story there, dealing with with President Trump and your wife and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Are there any other stories from your time as an ambassador that sort of stick out that you can share with us?
Well, I don't know that it was funny, but being involved in AUKUS, getting off the ground, was great fun. And then being able to see President Biden in that context and other contexts. And when I was meeting with him, he didn't come across as if he'd lost his marbles. So there was quite a change between when I last saw him, March 23, and the debate in 2024. Like, he has a bit of a stutter, which has gotten worse as he's got older, but he was otherwise on top of his brief. He knew what he was talking about. He had command of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, when I think back on that period, they're the sort of memories that come through, working with really intense, talented people in America. It's incredible how many people in America are highly qualified. I mean, it's a big country, so there's lots of them, but how many highly qualified people they have in government. The brain power is just tremendous. And I was really, really impressed by that. But look, sometimes as an ambassador, I had to intervene on things. So one night, the American Australian Leadership Dialogue were having a meeting in DC, and this guy in the White House, Kurt Campbell, who was like the Indo-Pacific coordinator, thought he'd put on a sketch. And in this sketch, he and another guy are talking about AUKUS. They're talking about the French, because the French had given the Americans a really hard time. And
you want a submarine?
And this guy says to me, and at a certain part in the proceedings, you got to come on stage and sort of get us apart. And I remember they were starting to get a bit willing, sort of, and I jumped up. And they were fighting over a kangaroo, a little toy kangaroo. So I had to grab the kangaroo and say, leave that kangaroo alone, and get off the stage. And I said to the audience, and you wonder why America is behind. These guys have spent the whole day doing their sketch. The Chinese have built 5 warships today.
What a classic.
So one was Deputy Chief of Staff in the White House, and the other one was the Indo-Pacific coordinator. But I rescued that kangaroo.
There you go.
It's on our coat of arms. Respect. Come on.
Respect. Yeah. And we don't need our coat of arms, or do we?
Depends what state you're in, maybe. Yeah. Possibly. But I don't walk backwards, that's for sure. Look, I guess the last word, I don't want to say out with the old and with the new, but Fiona, the new federal member, I'm already claiming you.
He's anointed you.
You're going to win. So.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The last word with you. What do you want to tell all the Greek community out there in Sydney? Anything else you want to say? In Barton?
It would be a privilege to be able to stand up in federal parliament and represent Australians, but also representing the Greek community, the Greek Australian community. And as a female, hopefully I get to have that privilege and the honour, and I won't let you down.
Yeah, definitely. Look, we can vouch for that. You've been taught by the best. And I don't think you can get any better than that from education into politics. What do you think, Tom?
Absolutely. We're so proud of the fact that there are people within our community that are taking part in the process, and that, you know, Fiona, you've put your hand up. As we said earlier, this is not a job or jobs. You know, public service is not a job for the faint-hearted. It's a huge responsibility. It's a huge sacrifice.
Absolutely.
Massive.
To a slightly lesser extent, but equally as important for Greeks to be part, you know, to be holding that baton and saying this is something that we have been about for so many thousands of years. We're just so glad that they exist, no matter what side of politics that they're on. You know, whether they're on the left or the right or center, whatever the case is, just be part of the process. We're proud of the fact that you guys have been there to represent us and, you know, potentially represent us. Guys, thank you so much for being here. It's been very interesting, Arthur, I have to say.
Been a great chat.
A brilliant chat, a timely chat. So thank you so much for being here, Arthur.
Congratulations on everything you do. 100 plus countries we're talking about, is that right?
Definitely 130.
130 odd, yeah.
And you've got people like Stephen Fry who come on the program. That's just respect.
Thank you very much for that.
I also want to thank you very much. I know you started humble beginnings.
Very humble.
Very similar to myself, and you have skyrocketed, both of you. I know a lot of work goes into this, and congratulations for being the voice of the Greek community.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Huge
Nice
accolades
rap.
for us. Absolutely.
Thank you, Fiona.
No problem at all. And if anyone does feel like supporting myself in the next
Yes,
election, we are very much a volunteer organisation, and self-funded. So let me know. Please reach out. Even if you can only spare 1 hour of your time leading up to the election or on election day, that's more than enough. Thank you very much.
And how can they reach out to you, Fiona? Facebook or Instagram?
Instagram.
Yep.
Yeah, just DM me on Instagram, Fiona Douskou. Very easy. Douskou.
Great. We'll try and have the links.
Absolutely.
In our show notes
Thank
as
you.
well.
Absolutely. How good is this, Nick? But people who are really making, or have made, and are going to make a difference in our lives as Australians with Greek heritage. It's fantastic, isn't it?
We're in a good place.
We are. We've got good people.
We do.
Fantastic, guys. Thank you very much. uzotalk@outlook.com is the email. Follow us on social media @uzotalk and @uzo_talk on Instagram. Also on YouTube. Nick Athanasiou, thank you very much, mate.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Uzo Talk is produced, written and presented by Tom Skolarikas and Nick Athanasiou. Our theme music is written and played by Peter Apostolidis, with additional music from George Kalapidis and Bouzouki legend Thanasis Polykadriotis.
Ακολουθήστε μας στο Soundees, στο Spotify, στο Apple Podcasts και στο Google Podcasts.